Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Royal Blue podcast. It's Wednesday. It's the day after Everton's first win of the season. I'm your host for today's show, Ian Croll, and joining me this afternoon to talk all things Everton, we have Connor O'Neill. Connor, how are things? All good?
Very well. All the better after last night. A much needed victory. I'm sure we'll get into the nuts and bolts of it. But yeah, a much needed victory and a cup scare avoided, which I think was the most important thing to come from last night.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get going, though, Connor, I do feel like I owe you a bit of an apology. I have been nagging you, haven't I, for the past couple of weeks to come on the podcast. And to be fair, you have declined a couple of times, but you are taking time out of your day off to come on to the show today. So I apologise and I thank you for coming on. Although it is quite funny that you are coming on after an Everton win. It's kind of, is it a coincidence or?
I mean, you say that, but this is the second successive, the second in three that I've done. Because I done
Is
Friday,
it?
with Chris, yeah.
Oh, well, that went with me. I was off, so
Previewing Tottenham, but no, just thought it was time to show my commitment to the Roble podcast after a few weeks leave.
What a time to do it as well after a 3-0 win.
yeah. Could have been also different.
It could have. Okay, then. Well, the usual housekeeping and plugs to start the podcast off with. Please, if you hit the bell and give us a like on YouTube for this video, and if you haven't already, then please go and subscribe to the channel. We are not live streaming today's show, but as always, join the debate and drop us a comment in the comment section. And of course, to our listeners on our audio platforms, remember to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Pods and Spotify. As I always say, doing so will make us look really good. To the agenda then, Connor. Obviously, Everton recorded the first win of the season last night. Albeit in the League Cup and albeit against the lower league opposition, but let's face it, we don't care. It was much needed, and thanks to that second half performance, convincing scoreline, it felt good, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that was the most important thing for last night. I wrote this in my analysis in today's paper online today. Is it just had to be a case of job done? I think it was never it was one of them, wasn't it? Defeat's not an option, but a real poor performance probably wasn't an option. The first half wasn't great, if I'm being brutally honest. It was a tough watch. Second half was far from vintage, but Everton carved out, a number of openings, scored 3 good goals. Probably should have had a few more, if I'm being honest. Jack Harrison misses a really good chance, doesn't he, later on? Beto misses the header before he eventually gets on a score sheet. So yeah, it was a workman-like performance, I think it's safe to say, but Everton got the job done. That was the most important thing. They're obviously in the half around number 3 tonight. Well, all eyes see who they get next. But yeah, for me, it was just a big case of get the job done, get in the next round, and get that victory that was much needed and the fans had craved.
I'm just glad my League Cup prediction of Everton winning the League Cup didn't fall at the first hurdle, to be honest. So it doesn't look stupid even if we go out in the next round. But we continue on, and obviously we are in the next round, so it'll be interesting to see who we do get. As you mentioned there, the draw is tonight, I think, after the Newcastle game, isn't it? Which is obviously live on telly. I mean, did you fear the worst, Connor, from the first half performance? Like you say, I don't think Doncaster really threatened us too much, but it just felt a little bit like same old Everton. A lot of endeavour, not really getting the ball in behind. And Beto, you can tell he was getting a little bit frustrated already early on in that first half. But like I say, second half was slightly different. Maybe not when we first came out, but certainly 10, 15 minutes in, Ndiaye certainly made the difference there, didn't he?
Yeah, I think that was the big thing, wasn't it? It was the class that Everton possess showed. You think of Iroegbunam's first goal, which is a great strike from the edge of the box, first time. You then look at Ndiaye's second goal, moment of real brilliance, individual brilliance. And obviously, eventually Beto gets on the score sheet when the game opens up a little bit. But yeah, it was an interesting one because I think the first half Everton played like a team who perhaps, no perhaps about it, who have lost their first 2 games, conceded 7 and scored none in the process, and being well and truly walloped at the weekend at Tottenham. They probably played like a team who looked like that. And obviously, they had a few players who were coming back as well. I thought James Garner was a little bit rusty to start with, gave the ball away, carelessly a few times, but got better the more the game went on. Obviously, Seamus Coleman was making his first start since Roma. So there was them, factors to take into it. But yeah, I thought the first half was a little bit uninspiring and a little bit worrying because it felt like there was a bit of a Tottenham hangover, perhaps, from what we've seen so far this season. But second half, Everton stepped up, and the Premier League class showed, and certainly the first 2 goals. And I referenced it in my my ratings where you look at Iroegbunam, first half he looked like the only Premier League player on the pitch, compared to everyone else, because there wasn't much between the two sides. So yeah, Everton's class showed, which is good, because that's what should happen, because ultimately there's a reason why Doncaster are in League Two and Everton in the Premier League. But yeah, I think the important thing was it did get better. We did start to carve out some openings, and we did score some goals, which is the most important thing, because like we've seen so far this season, scoring goals doesn't look like it's going to be very easy for this Everton team. And if anything, it looks like it could be a bit of a tough ask for them to score 2s and 3s every week, because we don't look like we've got the creativity from what we've seen so far. But I'm sure we'll get into that, because that could change if Sean Dyche makes a few personnel tweaks, I think, moving forward, or certainly for Saturday.
I mean, fans were crying out for some of the new signings to start, not just last night, obviously, from the opening game. Let's face it, even the Tottenham game, we were hoping for an O'Brien, a Lindstrom, and Ndiaye. Obviously, they have featured in parts, but not started games. So how did you think they fared last night? Those 3 in particular, because we know Tim Iroegbunam is a new player as well, but he's already cemented himself by the looks of it in that midfield. I felt O'Brien wasn't really tested much, but looked assured. Felt Lindstrom was a little bit off the pace, but did show a little, a few signs of what he could bring. And obviously, you're hoping that he's going to get better. But Ndiaye, certainly in the second half, he was, one of the standouts for me. Great goal, created it himself. I mean, we'll come on to this, but I think he has to start as the number 10 on Saturday for me. I'm sure there'll be a lot of debate over that. But how do you think those 3 fared?
Yeah, I mean, you start the back. I think Jake O'Brien, people were quite keen to see him given a chance. Obviously, he's a high-profile sign who's come in. There's a lot of excitement around that signing because of what he'd done at Lyon in recent seasons, and people are excited. And one thing I can confirm, I haven't seen him close up last night, is he's an incredibly tall lad.
He's massive, isn't he? Massive.
You do not realise how. I was fortunate enough to interview Tim Iroegbunam after the game in the tunnel, and O'Brien walked past us. We were conducting the interview, and he is absolutely huge. You don't realise how big the lad is until you see him, right in front of you. I agree. I thought he was assured. I didn't think he put a foot wrong. I thought he kept everything simple. He done everything that was asked of him. My only, not so much concern, but my only thinking is that I think last night's game suits him a little bit more than maybe a Premier League game would at this point in his Everton career. Obviously, with Doncaster, it was very much, into the forwards, hustle and bustle, and, that type of environment of what we, I would like to see him maybe tested where, he's up against the forward who wants to run the channels or wants to run in behind. I think that'll be the real test to see how far away he is from being a starter, or how far he's still got to come to adjust to life in the Premier League. Because obviously we've seen it in years gone by. It's the best league in the world for a reason. It's got the best players in the world for a reason. The pace and the power of it, is unmatched. And we've seen players from all leagues across the whole of Europe come in and struggle initially because of it's such a culture change. So yeah, I think it was a good game for Jake O'Brien. I think to get his full debut, his full 90 minutes in, good one to ease him in. Whether that's enough for him to start at the weekend. Obviously, James Tarkowski didn't play last night because he'd been carrying a knock in recent weeks. Whether Sean Dyche feels he saw enough to stick with Keenan O'Brien on Saturday over Tarkowski remains to be seen. I highly doubt it. I think Tarkowski, provides these fit, will be back in alongside Michael Keane on Saturday. But yeah, it was a good way for O'Brien, I think, to get 90 minutes under his belt and to start, life for Everton.
Is that something that you would do, or is that something that you think Dyche would do? Is that he's saying it because Dyche is going to do it?
Dyche would pick James Tarkowski. I mean, my big concern, and we'll go off a bit of a tangent here, but my big concern.
A lot of concern so far. We won last night, Connor.
In the changes, I don't think James Tarkowski's been 100% fit. I think I don't think we're seeing James Tarkowski at his ultimate best because he's not 100% fit. I think he's had 2 tough games, if I'm being honest. Probably 2 of the toughest games I've seen him have in his Everton career. Certainly Saturday, the weekend. There's obviously a lot of talk around Michael Keane, but I didn't think it was a game in which James Tarkowski covered himself in a lot of glory either. But now I can see why, and I think Sean Dyche alluded to it last night, where he said he's obviously been carrying a knock and stuff like that. He's not been 100% fit, which obviously impacts, on one's performance. But yeah, I think come Saturday, if Tarkowski is back available and fit, then I think we'll see him in alongside Michael Keane. But yeah, moving, I think Jesper Lindstrom, he showed flashes of quality. I think he put a couple of good balls into the box. But for me, he just drifted out the game too much. He wasn't really in it, for the full. It was just over an hour, I think he played. He drifted in and out a little bit too much for me. And I think that's one area that he's probably got to improve. He's got to be a constant asset, not someone who shows flashes, but then goes missing for 5 or 10 minute spells. So yeah, I think there's still a lot to come, I think, in terms of him. And he's the one, I think, once he gets fit and he gets available, hopefully then, we will see him produce, 60, 90 minute performances. But yeah, I just thought last night he was a bit in and out of the game and didn't really, stick at it and produce, real moments of class. It was just more flashes. But
that's to be expected, though, do you think, from a player who's, not really had much of a pre-season under Dyche with Everton and, has struggled, obviously, with Napoli last season. He's, he hasn't just got to bed into a new team. It's obviously a new league as well, and we know how tough the Premier League can be for new players coming in. So obviously we don't want to be too harsh on him, do we? But I do agree with you that he did. It felt like he not struggled, but he just felt like he was off the pace. I think I would probably
he just drifted in and out, didn't he? He would show flashes, of what he can offer, but then he wouldn't. He'd probably go missing for 5 minutes, and you wouldn't know he was on the pitch. I've got to hope, though, like I say, that comes with time on the pitch. That comes with people getting to know the surroundings, getting to know his teammates. Obviously, probably a different way of playing at Everton than what he's been used to at Napoli. So, I think that will just take time. I think, he probably needs a few more games to get up to speed with the pace of the Premier League as well, because obviously it's a whole different, like I alluded to earlier, it's a whole different beast compared to what he's probably been used to in Serie A. So yeah, I think it's a work in progress, isn't it? I think maybe we might not see the best of Jesper Lindstrom until the back end of September, come early October. But as for Ndiaye, I thought he was absolutely superb. Even in the first half, I thought he tried to make things happen. Not much come off for him, but there was the turn, wasn't he? I think midway through the first half where kind of got everyone on the edge of the seats. He just looked like the type of player Everton have been craving for years in terms of that, wanting to be a number 10, wanting to get on the ball, wanting to make things happen, wanting to be direct and run a goal. And we saw that with the goal he eventually scores, just the way he picks the ball up. He makes a good, 15, 20 yard forward run, cool side for finishing into the Glasgow Street net. And obviously now Sean Dyche has a real conundrum on his hands, because does he go back to the tried and tested Abdoulaye Doucouré in the number 10, which we've seen him stick with for so long, and obviously there's been rewards in playing Doucouré in that role, or does he roll the dice at the weekend and bring in Ndiaye in for his first Premier League start? Looks to get a little bit of creativity, looks to get someone on the ball, looks to make things happen. For me, I think it's an absolute no-brainer. I think you've got to throw Ndiaye in on Saturday from the off. I think he's showed at the weekend that he showed last night that he's everything that Everton need. He's everything that Everton didn't have at the weekend at Tottenham. That's someone with that ability to put the foot on the ball and make things happen, be direct, be creative. So yeah, I think Ndiaye, the best thing you say about Ndiaye is he's give Sean Dyche a real headache and a real conundrum to make, because I think we saw last year in one of them, I think it was the Burnley Carabao Cup tie, where Arnaud Danjuma started and didn't really do anything to give Sean Dyche a headache. If anything, it probably just reaffirmed why Sean Dyche ultimately was persistent with Arnaud Danjuma on the bench. Last night we saw the total opposite, where Ndiaye come in, made a big impact, scored a great goal, certainly got people talking about him, which I think is a positive. When no fans are saying we've got to get him in. And I think for me now he's got to start on Saturday, because quite simply, without him in that team, you do wonder where the creativity is going to come from.
I mean, the players there certainly last night starting to stake some claims for places in the starting 11. Is there a scenario, just dead quick, do you think, where Doucouré and Ndiaye can play in the same starting 11?
There is, obviously, there definitely is, because you could play Doucouré a little bit deeper. But again, the issue Everton, Sean Dyche has now got is Tim Iroegbunam, who's established himself as an undroppable in that team. So, that's one midfield place taken up. Then you've obviously got James Garner and Idrissa Gana Gueye potentially battling for the other. Decore probably isn't as natural as number 6, stroke number 8 is what James Garner and Idrissa Gana Gueye are. So there probably could be a point this season where Decore and Ndiaye play in the same team if Everton a little bit stretched or a little bit short in midfield. But I think, everyone available, a full squad to choose from. Certainly look at this weekend, Idrissa Gana Gueye, Tim Iroegbunam, should be available. It probably means it's either Ndiaye or Decore who plays in front in the number 10. For me, it has to be Ndiaye. I just think he's got so much to offer that Everton don't already have. And I just think they would look a better team with him in the 10 than what they have done so far this season.
Just the last point on the new players then who played last night before we move on to Beto. Just an observation. I'm sure everyone, most people, noticed it as well. What did you make of the swapping and kind of interchanging of the three behind Beto? Obviously, Lindstrom, McNeil, and Ndiaye. I felt like, I don't know whether it was instructions from Dyche or whether it was just the three, deciding to do it themselves. But it seemed to happen quite frequently. There's times in games where, after about, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes, you see wingers change flanks because it's not quite working. The fullback might have the better of the winger, so you just try and freshen it up a bit. You do what you can tactically to make things happen. But I felt like this move was quite frequent throughout, and I don't know whether I kind of liked it, to be honest, because I felt like the first half was again a little bit. We touched upon how we struggled a little bit. I don't want to go as far as to say disjointed, but I felt like when Ndiaye moved into the middle, and McNeil always seems to just drift in to the middle anyway from the left hand side. It's a weird one. Do you think that was more instructions from Dyche, or do you think the players just thought free reign? We're just going to try and see what we can do and getting into the right positions?
No, I definitely think it was instructions from Sean Dyche, because I think he referenced afterwards, didn't he, that he thought Ndiaye done well on the left, so that's perhaps something that he wanted to see, wanted to trial out. I think that was quite interesting that Ndiaye moved to the left, and Sean Dyche highlighted about how well he done there after the game, because perhaps that's a hint that he perhaps sees him playing as a winger at times this season, which, if we go back to the point about Decore, means that Decore could then play number 10 if Ndiaye plays on the left. Obviously, and again, McNeil's another one, isn't he? People have long championed that perhaps he should be playing off the forwards in a more central role. Is he got more to offer? Is it more playing off the forwards as a central role? So I think it's definitely something that Sean Dyche has clearly worked on. It's definitely something that is in Sean Dyche's thinking. For me, I think Everton look a better team with McNeil out wide and Ndiaye playing in the 10, rather than McNeil possibly playing in the 10 and Ndiaye playing on the left. But it's good that we've got options. It's good that we can do something different, because I think for far too long, one of the criticisms, or my criticisms of Everton, is that they've been far too predictable. I think they've been far too, it's easy to work out what they're going to do. They only have players who could play one position, and once you put that team out, it's quite clear what's going to occur. So it's good that they've got it's good that they've got options. It's good that they've got flexibility, I think, in terms of how they can approach games and how they can change during games. But I think Everton on the whole are a lot stronger team with McNeil on one flank and Ndiaye playing in the 10 off the centre forward.
Yeah, I just don't know how. I read those comments from Dyche, and I was unsure whether they were real, and I didn't know whether someone was, playing a little prank on Twitter. But I don't know how you could come away from that game and insist or pinpoint that Ndiaye was better from the left hand side. I just don't know how that.
I'm not sure if he quite took it in that context. I think it was probably more of a thing of like how good his overall performance was, and how essentially he also performed well on the left, and it wasn't just down the middle. I don't think it was a total kind of walk away of like perhaps he thought Ndiaye was better on the left centrally. I think it was just more him kind of praising the whole approach and praising the the performance on the whole of Ndiaye more than pinpoint one aspect of it.
I'll let him off then until we see the team news on Saturday, and probably with
I think team
Ndiaye
news
on the
on
left.
Saturday is going to be very, very interesting for a number of reasons, isn't it?
It's Everton team news, Connor. It's always interesting. It's Twitter is a minefield, certainly when Everton team news comes out. Okay, well, let's move on then. Beto came in for Dominic Calvert-Lewin. From my point of view, he's obviously taken a lot of criticism over the course of the past 12 months. He hasn't really been able to get in the team because Dominic Calvert-Lewin has been head and shoulders above him. But I do think there is a player in there, and even after watching last night, despite a lot of frustration, in his play, I still think there is a player in there. We certainly don't play to his strengths. For me, he plays on the shoulder of the last defender, and we certainly don't, actively look to get balls in behind or, that type of thing. I think the new tackling players could maybe remedy that situation. I think there was glimpses of it last night, and I just think he continues to try too hard, and when he does that, it makes him look clumsy. He tries to do too much, and there was a little bit in the game last night where he ended up getting the ball in the final third. Perfect pass on to McNeil, I think it was, and then he's quickly surrounded by 3-4 Doncaster defenders, and he just tries to take all 4 on, and he just gets tackled and loses possession of the ball. Again, I'll reiterate, I think there is a player in there, but for you, did he do enough to stake his claim for Bournemouth ahead of Calvert-Lewin? I mean, we'll come on to the future of Dominic Calvert-Lewin. It is deadline day on Friday, so Dominic Calvert-Lewin quite feasibly could have played his last game for Everton, so Beto could be in regardless. But just for the time being, if Calvert-Lewin is still an Everton player come Saturday afternoon, has Beto done enough to stake his claim?
Probably not. I think he tried really hard. He can't knock his effort, puts himself about. He just didn't really look like he was going to score, did he? But then he eventually did get on managed to get on the score sheet later on. But it looked like it was going to be one of them nights for him, didn't it, for a large part of it, where, I think the heads at the Gladys Streets especially, where, he probably should burst the net, and I think he's diverted it wide. I still think Dyche would stick with Calvert-Lewin just because of what he offers in terms of he's a little bit more rounded in terms of what you're going to get. He can hold the ball, he can run in behind, he can hold the channels. So I think Calvert-Lewin is probably still just ahead of Beto in the pecking order. I still think when it comes to Beto, it's a little bit chaotic and a little bit unpredictable. You don't really know what you're going to get. I don't think he knows what he's going to do at times, Beto. So no one else can kind of work out what he's going to do.
I think that's the point, just to interrupt you, and you can carry on, but I think that's the point that I was trying to make. The less he touches of the ball, the better. And what I mean by that, he's kind of just a player that when he thinks about it too much, it just messes up for him. He's a player who, if he's running onto goal, where he can just have one pot shot, or he's in the 18-yard box, the 6-yard box, I think he could be quite deadly. It's just getting the ball into those areas for him, getting the ball in the areas that he can run onto. I mean, I don't know whether you agree, but I just feel we don't play to his strengths, and I find it difficult for him to be having good games when that is the case.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is always the problem, isn't it, with Everton, because they're not a creative team. They don't carve out loads of openings, so it's always hard to judge the forwards, because you judge the forwards on scoring goals, but they're not always in positions to score goals, are they? If that makes sense, because of the way Everton play, it can be a little bit laboured. But yeah, I just think Calvert-Lewin probably still just ahead of him in the pecking order. But I do think it might be interesting, because Saturday Sean Dyche might turn around and he might put Ndiaye over to Corey, Beto win over Calvert-Lewin. You might look at the first 2 games and think, the first 2 Premier League games, think, time to do something different, time to freshen things up. We're going to, try something different. You can't rule that out. I don't think you can rule out Dyche kind of maybe freshening things up in that respect. So I think it's going to, my personal, I think Calvert-Lewin is still a little bit ahead of Beto in the pecking order. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Dyche thought, now's the time to roll the dice a little bit and freshen things up and give people an opportunity. We haven't had an opportunity so far this season.
We'll come on to Calvert-Lewin's future at the end. Obviously, my favourite topic on a podcast, because we don't really know what's going to happen. He's obviously been linked with, I think, Manchester United and Newcastle over the course of the past 24 hours. So we will see what happens there. But I think we need to talk about Tim Iroegbunam, to be honest, Connor, because I think he is a player who's obviously come in and, not much was expected of him. Whether that is the case from the coaches and the people inside the club, but it's certainly that was the my opinion. I thought we were bringing someone who would potentially even go out on loan, but already 3 games in, 2 league games and a cup game, he cemented himself probably as one of the first names on the team sheet. What you make of that? Is that a surprise for you? I mean, he just looked like, I think you described him earlier on in the podcast there as the only Premier League player on the pitch or something like that.
Well, I thought in the first half he looked the only Premier League player. I know Ndiaye showed quality, but he couldn't really get on the ball to make things happen. But he showed like he was the only player who was a Premier League player. With his performance, I thought he was head and shoulders above everyone in that first half. He was just outstanding. I think he's an undroppable now. I think I wrote this in my analysis piece this morning. Blue supporters would have been forgiven, I think, when first emerged that Everton were in talks to sign him from Aston Villa. If they had to Google him to get the lowdown on him, because he was not exactly a name on people's lips, was he? He wasn't someone who was well known. But now there's certainly no need for Google, because what we've seen so far, I know we're only 3 games in, but he did impress in pre-season as well. He's been absolutely outstanding. He seems to be getting better and better. He's a real dominant figure. And I think it speaks volumes that, you look at Sean Dyche, his approach with the new signings has been they need to gain, a little bit more experience, and they're going to be eased in. Iroegbunam has been straight in from the start and hasn't looked back. And, I think now he is an undroppable in that Everton team. He certainly made the midfield a lot more robust, a lot better. So, yeah, I think, the biggest compliment you can pay the lad is that he is now an undroppable, and, he's cemented himself in Everton's midfield.
And obviously alongside Iroegbunam was the return and James Garner, a bit of a surprise selection, because I don't think many people thought he was going to be back this quick. I think, from the initial reports that we got, it could have been weeks, if not months. But, James Garner returns, solid performance for me, and I felt like he looked good alongside him, Iroegbunam. And, it would be nice if those two could, forge a bit of a partnership. But, I mean, overall, is this a season now that Garner's back fit and, managed to get himself in the starting 11 for that cup game? Is this a season where he actually really needs to kick on and kind of make that central midfield position his own? Because let's face it, he's done okay, but he's not like a utility player as such. But we know he's played right back in the past. He's played right mid. I think we know that he wants to play in the centre of the park. I think that's his preferred position. Let's face it, he's got to kick on now, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, first to James Garner, I think he done well last season. He probably was a little bit underappreciated how well he done last season. Because obviously, like, Jack Brownthwaite was so good, Tarkowski was so good, Pickford was so good, Calvert-Lewin coming at the end and was so key, and Everton picking up the points needed to ensure that they'll be playing Premier League football this season. I think James Garner is a really good player. I think the big thing for him now is becoming that real dominant force and figure in the middle of the pitch. I think central midfield is his natural position. That's where he wants to play. I think, he's keen to play there. But yeah, I think now the next step for him is being that real dominant figure, and that, taking control of games perhaps, and being the stand-up man, being the key player. You look at it and you think, Tim Iroegbunam, who's come in and he's probably done that in the last couple of weeks, in terms of being that outstanding figure. That's what James Garner now has to aspire to be. But no, I think it was really positive sign to see James Garner back, because obviously Idrissa Gana Gueye is, a very good player, but he's getting to a certain age now where he's probably not got long left, if we're being honest. This might be his last season at Everton, given his age and stuff like that. You would like to see, a partnership between James Garner and Tim Iroegbunam start to blossom, because that's one, given both of their ages, that could, last for a number of years to come. So now the challenge is on him to ensure that he puts himself in, a position to do that, and he's, he starts to step up to that next level.
Okay, well, we'll finish off with this last topic then, because obviously it is your day off, Connor, and I don't want to keep you too long. So, my favourite topic, Dominic Calvert-Lewin's Everton future, left out of the starting 11 last night, but deadline day is fast approaching, and as mentioned, he has been linked. Well, he's obviously, it's a transfer saga as such, or a contract transfer saga, but past 24 hours or so, I think he's been linked with United, Manchester United, as well as Newcastle United. So, what's your gut feeling then? What are we now as the time of recording? It's Wednesday, the 28th. Deadline day is Friday. Are you expecting movement for Calvert-Lewin?
I've been torn on this, to be fair, for about 3 weeks, because I convinced myself that someone will come in for him in the final week of the window a while ago, because it's Everton. Nothing's ever straightforward, is it? The more it goes on now, the more I'm less sure that will happen. I think there's a few moving parts that make things quite interesting. It's quite clear today that I think Man United have entered the race for Tony, I think. It's been reported. He is someone I think Calvert-Lewin is someone United have looked at and will be interested in. But obviously, if they can get Tony in, they'll probably see him as a better fit, given the amount of goals that Tony scored in recent seasons compared to Calvert-Lewin. Probably a little bit more of a better fit the way Ten Hag wants to play as well in terms of what he offers. I still think I don't think he'll go to Newcastle. I think that's dead and buried now. I think that's there's no chance of that. The only other club that I think could make a surprise approach for him is Arsenal. There's still talk that they want to bring in a full play before Friday's deadline. That's the one key area of the pitch that Arteta believes he needs to strengthen. Obviously, they've had such a strong start to the season. They'll probably be thinking they've got a really good chance of going for the title. So I do wonder whether they will make a low ambitious move to get Calvert-Lewin. What I mean by that is make an offer that's probably not anywhere near what Evertonians would have in mind as a valuation for Calvert-Lewin as we sit here now, but one in which they will argue and say, well, he's out of contract at the end of the season. You've offered him a new deal, and he's not took the option to sign that new deal. So you still can't rule anything out, but I still think if I had to make a choice, I still think he'd be an Everton player this time next week. So he'll be in the squad on Saturday. But yeah, I think there is concern. I think there's concern that an approach could come for him in the next few days because of the situation in which Everton find themselves in, and that his deal is up at the end of the season. He's yet to sign a new contract. He's been offered a new contract. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of nervousness there, and we'll only know come Friday night whether what is actually happening. But I'm leaning more now towards that. I think he will be an Everton player come the weekend, and he'll remain at the football club. But yeah, I think the big question of all, I think it's something that it's been spoken about in this podcast quite a bit. Chris Beasley wrote a piece on it. Is ultimately this is in the hands of Everton because they don't have to accept any offer that comes in for Calvert-Lewin. They can say no. The problem they've got is how do you say no to an offer for a player who is out of contract at the end of the season, has rejected the contract that you've offered him. From January, he's free to negotiate a contract or an offer with overseas clubs. So Everton have got a big question that they need to answer if an offer does arrive for Calvert-Lewin in terms of how valuable they see him and what the priority is. Is the priority just to keep because it makes Sean Dyche squad stronger, or is the priority to get so much, to get funds in for him because you run the prospect of losing them for free next summer. So that is a big conundrum. But I think as things stand right now, I'm leaning certainly more towards that he'll be an Everton player this time next week, and at the weekend he'll remain at the football club.
I mean, I think that's the issue, isn't it? The unknown entity of his actual transfer fee, of what we could actually demand for him because of his contract actually running out. I think Joe and Chris, among other reports, have suggested that Everton are looking for 20 million. But let's face it, Everton, let's talk about another transfer just for a brief second. We're looking for an excess of 75, 80 million for Jared Branthwaite, but Manchester United didn't get anywhere near that. The issue is that if whatever club coming for him doesn't, it's irrelevant. I would be very surprised if they were to put in an offer of 20 million, in excess of 20 million. And then the problem is, how are you going to find a replacement for Dominic Calvert-Lewin? Because surely we can't go a full season with Beto just as our number one striker. Because if we let Calvert-Lewin go and don't replace him, you can just imagine the uproar and the fury with regards to just letting him go and not bringing in a replacement. Although, like you say, the ball is in Everton's court. It's, we've been over this so many times, Connor. It just goes back and forth, and Friday's just going to be so interesting as to what happens. But
that's the big issue is right, because they would need to replace him, but how do they replace him? Because
you're not going to get anyone better. Really,
it's so hard to replace him, isn't it? And
you have to get so lucky.
What do they do? Try and bring somebody on loan, which is a gamble. And then obviously the biggest gamble of all is then just going with Beto for the season. Obviously Schmitty's going to be out for a while, so you run the risk of just operating solely with Beto. It's such a huge gamble, but obviously it's such a big question facing the football club, because, like I say, on one hand there's the element of, well, he's far too important to let him go, if you're going to replace him, etc. And then on the other hand, you've got to think of, well, yeah, but this is all well and good, but we stand to lose, a lot of money this time next summer, because he'll be allowed to leave on a free, and there's nothing we can do about it. So it's a big question facing Everton. You would hope that they don't have to answer that question, and that no one comes forward and takes a punt on Calvert-Lewin, or comes in with an offer that they think might get over the line. That's the big hope, is that Everton don't face that question, that no one comes near him, no one comes in sniffing. But whether that happens remains to be seen. But yeah, as things stand at the minute, I think I'm leaning more towards that he'll be an Everton player. He'll still be an Everton player at the weekend.
The most important part, or the most important aspect, is this season, regardless of whether someone comes in for Dominic Calvert-Lewin, even if it's a sufficient enough offer. Say it is an offer of 15-20 million, and Everton bite the bullet and just say, right, yeah, let's go for it. You have to bring in a replacement. Now, whether that's a replacement who's on par with Calvert-Lewin, a replacement who's better than Calvert-Lewin, that will remain to be seen. But I get the pre-planning ahead, and PSR for next season, and shoring up the books and bringing in enough money to make sure that we don't break any rules. But staying in the league is just the most important aspect for everything, regardless. And and we all know Calvert-Lewin's goal scoring record is not great, but if he leaves and you don't bring in a replacement, you just one injury away to Beto from just an absolute nightmare injury scenario, and it's unthinkable, really. Again, it's one of those where it's only going to really be decided Friday night, so deadline day. It's going to be interesting. Are you going to be tuning in?
I'm working. I'm working.
Definitely
Friday,
going to be tuning in then.
So yeah, I'll be very much tuned into busy couple of days. Obviously, transfer deadline day on Friday, which is always a long and stressful day at Reach Towers. Is the craziness occurs, and then obviously then Saturday on to Goodison Park for Everton versus Bournemouth, which is as we've spoken about a lot since Tottenham, is a huge game for the Blues. So yeah, it's going to be a very big, I think, couple of days for Everton, because obviously Friday we'll know what Sean Dyche's squad is going to look like for this season, because I think, if we're being brutally honest, the whole thing of transfers in January now seems to have bit the bullet a little bit, and it tends to be now what squads sides finish the summer with is what they will run with for the season. So obviously we will have that on Friday in terms of Calvert-Lewin's future, and a few of the, if Everton maybe get one or two others in, because there is obviously rumours out there that they are looking to bring other players in, and obviously then to Saturday, Everton still chasing that elusive Premier League win, and let's face it, they could really do with pick up 3 points against Bournemouth before heading to the September international break.
Yeah, well, we will have a Bournemouth preview on Friday. Not too sure who's going to be on the show. I think it's probably going to be me and Joe Thomas, but I am actually really looking forward to that game, despite everything that has gone on. I did miss the Brighton game, so, having watched Everton in person for the first time yesterday and them winning, it's got me geared up for a Saturday 3 p.m. kickoff, hopefully in the warm weather, in the sun, 3 points just before the international break, and hopefully get us back on track. Any final remarks, Connor, before we finish off?
No, nothing from me.
Okay, well, that is all for today's show. As always, please remember to hit the like button, and if you haven't already, give us a subscribe on the Royal Blue YouTube channel and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, 5-star review, please. That would be fantastic. You can also follow us on Facebook. We are Everton FC, Liverpool Echo. We'll call it a day there. And as mentioned, Bournemouth preview live Friday. I've been Ian Croll, joined by Connor O'Neill, and this has been the Royal Blue Podcast.